Hello. In this video, we're going to be looking at logging into iBase using Entra ID. Support for Entra ID became available from version 10.1. So we're going to start in iBase Designer, and what we need to do first is we need to provide the configuration information so that iBase can communicate with your organization's Azure setup. So what we're going to do is we're going to open an iBase database. Now the configuration information is actually stored in the security file. So you're mapping this on a per security file basis. So we don't actually need to open a database, but I'm going to because it makes it easier for me because it's nicely there in my MIU list. Now I'm going to log in as a regular iBase user. I'm not currently configured for Entra ID and I don't have Windows Active Directory set up here, so I'm just going to go ahead and log in as this sysadmin user. So as I say, we're logged into a database now. We don't need to be logged into a database. We just need to be logged into that security file. Once we're into the security file, we have this Configure Entra ID Support menu option. And if we click on that, we'll get this dialog up. Now, if you're not familiar with Azure and how this works, some of these terms aren't going to make sense, so I'll just quickly go through them with you. So the client ID, this is going to be a GUID, and it is the unique identifier for the iBase application within your Azure cloud setup. Now, obviously, your Azure cloud setup doesn't know about iBase when it first starts out, so this is going to need adding, and there's a fairly substantial configuration step involved in acquiring that ID that you're going to put in here for your client ID. I strongly suspect that for almost all organizations, this is going to be a conversation with your IT department. They will know what to do. They will get that all set up. Now, if you need any help from us, I can walk you through what you need to do if this is something that you will be doing yourself, but I'll keep that for another video because that's a Microsoft Azure exercise. It's not something that we would do within iBase. So we're going to assume here that we've got our client ID. We've been given it by our IT department. As I say, it's going to be a GUID. I'm just going to type ABC in there for something to put in the box. Then the next box we've got is the tenant ID. Now your tenant ID is, again, another GUID. It's the unique ID which identifies your organization within the Microsoft Azure ecosystem. So this will be, as I say, unique to your organization. Again, probably a conversation with your IT department, and they can provide you with this value. So I'm just going to go ahead and put 123 in there. Now, a quick note on the authority box down here. The vast majority of organizations, I strongly suspect you are going to be using the Microsoft public cloud, and you're going to be configured within that, in which case you don't need to change this at all. So just leave it as it is, and you can see down here how we map your tenant ID and produce a URL. And that's the URL that iBase is going to talk to find out about your users and make sure people are authenticated and all that kind of thing. Now, if there is a possibility that you have some kind of private cloud, but you're not connected to the internet, in that case, this is going to be different. And contact support, they will be able to help you with precisely what you're typing in here. But for the vast majority of customers, just leave that exactly as it is. And then we click OK. So you may have noticed some hand wavy magic going on just there. Obviously, in the last dialog that we looked at a couple of moments ago, I entered 123 and ABC for the client ID and the tenant ID. Clearly, those aren't the correct values for our organization, so I've just popped back into the dialog and put the correct values in to allow us to carry on with a live demo. So what we're going to do next is we're going to add an Entra ID user, and we'll do that through the security manager. Now, if you're familiar with adding and editing and what have you users in iBase, this dialog will be one you've seen before. If you're not familiar with this, if you're new to adding users, I strongly recommend that you go and have a look at some of the other material that we have. There's quite a lot going on in here, groups, permissions, things like that, that I'm simply not going to cover today, we're just skimming across the top to show you the changes for Entra ID. So to add a new user, we go and click on the New button. Again, you're probably familiar with this dialog, so just to call out the new bits and pieces that are in here, we've got this Entra ID option, which obviously is what we're going through today, and then we have this mixed mode. So I'll just mention mixed mode before we carry on. Mixed mode is intended to support organizations who are doing a staged transition. So if you've been using Windows Active Directory before, you have all your users and everything set up, but you are migrating small groups to Entra ID. Let's imagine that you have a site and that site is Windows Active Directory, you have another site and that site has migrated to Entra ID, and you have staff moving between the two. And in one, they're going to need to use single sign-on with Windows AD, and in another, they're going to use Entra ID. So that's what this is designed to support. It's allowing you to have essentially both, so you have that choice. Something to call out for that is the browse and the check name buttons. They were there before. They're how you find your users for Windows Active Directory. They do need the domain controller to be available. So you'll need to be on a machine that is joined to the Windows Active Directory domain to use those. So obviously if you're in an organization that is transitioning, then you need to be careful as to which machine you're on, because if you're on an Azure joined machine, you won't be able to see the domain controller for your Windows Active Directory, and so these buttons won't work. Now, Entra ID being what it is, you can log in to Entra ID on a Windows Active Directory joined machine, because of course you can log in as Windows Active Directory to the machine, and then you can also authenticate with Entra ID. So if you're going to use this mixed mode, it might be a good idea to do the configuration on a Windows Active Directory joined machine, just to make it easier for yourself. So going back to Entra ID, this is the user that we're going to add. Now, before I click browse, you'll remember that when I logged in to Designer, I logged in as an iBase user. So I'm logged in as sysadmin, and that's just standard iBase security. So how are we going to connect to Entra ID in order to see the users if we're not authenticated? Now, if I had logged in with an Entra ID account, because we'd set it up previously, then at this stage I would be authenticated. So when I click browse, it'll all just work. Because that's not the case, when I click browse, I need to go ahead and do that authentication. So what's going to happen is we'll get that login prompt popping up. So I'm just going to do that. And there it is. So I'm going to log in, and then we're going to come back and we're going to see about picking a user and that kind of thing. Okay, so having logged in, I've now got the Select Entra ID Object dialog. I've had to mask out the sections that are in here which have all the information, because obviously this is our organization, so those are real users in those lists. So I've just masked that out for you. But what I've done is I've searched for myself here, entered my name, clicked find, and that's going to give me a list of all the people called Craig in our organization. That's my name. I picked up my own account. There's a panel on this left-hand side which contains details about that user, so you can check you've definitely got the right person. You also have the ability to choose groups. So much like Windows Active Directory, Entra ID has groups as well as users, so you can go into that. That works in much the same way. You can enter a group name, click find, and there'll be a list of the relevant groups. So I've picked myself out of this list, and I'm going to click select. And now I have my user set up as me. So if we go through here, and I'm going to give myself lots of permissions, so if I can get in with that account in a minute. And you can see now that we have this user over here. So now what we're going to do is I'm going to come out of Designer, and we're going to log in to iBase User using that account. Okay, so here we are with iBase User. Now the machine that I'm on is not Azure joined, So under normal circumstances, what would happen if I attempted to log into an iBase database from this machine is it would just take me through to the regular iBase logon prompt. I wouldn't get anything to do with Windows Active Directory. I also wouldn't get anything to do with Entra. And that's because historically with Windows Active Directory, if you're not joined to the domain, there's nothing you can do about that. So you have to fall back to that iBase security. And so we follow that same behavior because that's how iBase has always behaved. However, with Entra ID, you do have the possibility to log in using Entra ID, even though we're not domain joined. So we couldn't use single sign-on on this machine, but we could still log ourselves in exactly the same way that we did in Designer. Now, to make that work, that is a change of iBase's behavior. So there's actually a registry entry that you'd need to set for that. And we can give you the details of that if you want to do that. Now, I've configured this machine to do that. So we're going to go ahead and have a look at how that's going to work. So if I choose that same database that we configured just now, we're going to get this select logon method dialog. So if you were using single sign-on, it would try Entra ID to start off with, because you'd be Entra joined, you'd be logged in as your Entra user, so it would try that single sign-on approach. And obviously if that worked, then you would go straight in. At this point, you would never see this dialog. But as I say, this machine is not joined to Entra, and so we come to this particular selection because I have that registry entry set. So I could still choose iBase security, and we'd go through to that same dialog that you normally see. We could log in as the same sysadmin that we were doing in Designer. But I'm going to choose Entra ID, and you're going to see again that we get that same logon prompt as we did previously. Obviously, you get all the corporate stuff that you would get for your particular organization. I've got mine, so I'm going to go ahead and log in just as I did previously. And there we are. So we've logged in using Entra ID to iBase user. You can see down here we have the username specified for who we're logged in as. And that's it for this video. Thank you for watching.